Hey guys, I'm here to talk about the second to last of the Godzilla dissections. It's been quite a journey, and today I'm here to talk about the very first Godzilla film, Gojira, 1954, the movie that started it all, and also, of course, in latter years, ever since 2004, has been moving up in the critical world and finally is being acknowledged for what it is, and that is a nuclear allegory masterpiece, and just one of the probably as many people hold it in the limelight of being the best Godzilla movie ever made, and that is true for many reasons. Now, of course, the character has evolved over time, and a lot of Godzilla films have alluded to Godzilla as the nuclear threat he was in this one, but none do it quite the way this one has done it. In fact, Godzilla has not been this terrifying. Basically, only in a few movies have even come close to this. Those being The Return of Godzilla, 1984, did its very best to try and bring back this terror. GMK did it very well, although there was almost no focus, if at all, on the nuclear aspect of Godzilla's history, which is fine. That film had a different tone to it. And yeah, like I said, very different. I mean, over the years, Godzilla has been a hero. He's been the anti-hero. He's been the force of nature, like in the new 2014 film. Like I said, 2014 film was more about the majesty and the awe of Godzilla more than the terror, which is fine. Like I said, it's all about different tones, and it's okay for the tone of character to change over the years. However, it's important to know where it all started, and this is where it all started with Gojira in 1954. Let's delve into this one. Let me say my brief history of this movie. I had not seen the Japanese version. I'm pretty sure if I said this before. Two of the classic media released that fantastic DVD box set where they included both King of the Monsters and this version. I believe they released it in 2004, 2008. I honestly can't remember for sure when exactly it was released. But before then, in 2004, I know they had finally done a few showings of the original Godzilla movie in theaters, Japanese subtitled, which must have been fantastic. Unfortunately, I didn't get to view it in theaters because, I live in Paris, California. There was no theaters nearby showing it. I was just a kid. There's no way I could drive out to LA. I didn't have a freaking car. With that being said, though, I did finally buy the DVD and I finally watched it, and I was blown away at just how much material was cut out of the original Gojira. I believe it was a whole 10, 15 minutes of footage they cut out. Uh, and I was also surprised how different the tone was. As I said in my last Godzilla section, Godzilla King of the Monsters had a more documentary-like feel to it. That's because it was told through the point of view of the American character Steve Martin, played by Ryan Burr. This film also has a documentary feel to it at times. However, the story is much more focused on a wide range of characters, which helps expand the views of what's going on. We have characters who are involved in the media, we have scientist characters, we have a few military characters, and of course we have the everyday down-to-earth people like, Ogata and Emiko, who are caught in the crossfires of all this chaos. And the main point of this movie, I'm sure everybody knows now, is about, an anti-nuclear message. This movie came out not even 10 years after World War II had just ended. The fact that a film like this was even made around that time is remarkable because the fact of its strong anti-nuclear message, which is why the American version was so heavily trimmed down to remove all that, sentiment out of there. Which I can't blame the Americans doing that because it's still a sensitive topic. And today, we've moved on from this whole thing. Nuclear threats is so far off. At least, to my opinion. Some people view it differently. However, the relevance of this movie is still very sharp in my mind, and that's the reason why Ishiro Honda, who directed this movie, that's the reason why he made this movie. As maybe people may or may not know, uh, he was a soldier in World War II, and he got to see, I believe it was the ruins of honestly I can't remember, it was Nagasaki or Hiroshima. He got to see the ruins of one of those films after one of those cities after the bomb had been dropped, and what he saw frightened him and basically scarred him for life. He saw the horrors of what a new age of warfare could do, and it frightened him, and of course it frightened a lot of people afterwards. As we all know, there has not been a nuclear weapon used since World War II outside of maybe testing them, but as far as actually using them in warfare, it has not been the case because everyone is aware of the potential destruction it could leash upon all of humanity. I mean, things have gone out of hand with their capabilities. Not long after World War II, the Russians had claimed to make a bomb that was 50 times more powerful than the ones used on Japan. So it's a terrifying concept when you think about it. And Honda put as much of that as he can into this movie, which is why I like it so much more than the American version. Because I like about the Japanese version, they have many scenes with not even major characters, but with simple civilians on the street, hearing news about Godzilla, and you see their reactions to it, and you can see the fear, and it gives you a glimpse also of what it's like to live in a country that has been hit by a nuclear weapon. In fact, the only country who's ever been hit by a nuclear weapon. You see the citizens, scared to death. They don't want to go back to living in shelters, and that's from when they used to, live in fear of the bombing raids. A lot of horror goes on during war, and nuclear weapons is probably, the pinnacle of the horror and destruction that can be brought about in a war. And that's the point that is expressed so much in this film. There are so many scenes of, unfortunately, the military and civilians alike suffering under the wrath of Godzilla because, as it was, I love the whole classic media edition because it comes even a booklet expressing the ideas of Ishiro Honda and, of course, of Godzilla fans and critics alike, expressing how the movie, shows that's what basis the movie. Godzilla is himself a nuclear weapon, and I believe it was Ed Gatsby. I always forget how to say his freaking name. It's him or Steve Reifel, but one of them said Godzilla's destruction of Tokyo is basically like a slow motion nuclear bomb, and that is so true. I love the cinematography of this movie. It's had some of the best shots of Godzilla I've seen basically throughout the entire history of the cinema of Godzilla. And someone who's watched each Godzilla movie at least 10 times each, and reality, a lot of them a hell of a lot more, especially this one. This movie really does have some of the most terrifying shots of Godzilla. You see great shots of the silhouette of Godzilla looming over buildings, you know, funnels of smoke behind him, the flames everywhere. Godzilla just wrecking everything, and you hear Ifikube's score just pounding the entire time, highlighting the horror of what's going on. And just like I said before, you see the civilians who are suffering the whole time. It brings to light who the real victims of any war are, and those are civilians. Of course, there are soldiers who also die, but civilians, of course, being the untrained, unprepared, section of society that we are. We are, of course, in any true war, it's devastating. Civilians are always, ones who die in the biggest numbers. Sometimes, not always. If you look at World War II and things like that, yeah, civilians are the ones who are the main people to suffer, and that's very true with the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those were civilian, not military targets, civilian targets, and because of those things, hundreds of thousands of civilians had to perish in those two strikes. So to point out that civilians are, people who have to endure through all this horror, it's not a stretch to say that that's very true, and the military is very involved in this movie as well. However, them as are the politicians in this movie, both prove ineffective, and that's the horror of it all. I mean, that's part of the tragedy of all of this, because early in the movie, as we see, the politicians try to discuss if Godzilla's a threat or not, and they kind of disregard him, and they think he's killed off very easily in the beginning of the situation. However, of course, that proves ineffective when Godzilla comes ashore and attacks by the train station, and they all finally get a sense of the horror of what they're dealing with. And the funny thing is, the Godzilla in this movie is an unstoppable threat for a very different reason he became later on. He's just more of a superhero type of creature, that can take all this damage. But in here, I like to think that Godzilla is so invulnerable because of, we wanted to see how helpless people become in a situation like this. And that's why every time Godzilla attacks one of these movies, I mean, something I noticed, that's why I love GMK so much for focusing more on a fantasy element of Godzilla. They did bring back a lot of the elements from this movie. And a lot of people will forget that. That's why I have so much respect for GMK. And when I say that, I mean the suffering of the civilians during all of this, which is another reason why I respect the 2014 movie so much. In every single scene of a movie like this one or GMK or 2014 movie, you see the civilians have to suffer during this entire thing. Because of the attack on the train station, you see people crying for for help, and they're terrified. Then the attack on the city, you see people who are trapped. Like I said, I've said before, one of the most heartbreaking scenes in this movie is where Godzilla is just leveling this area, and you see a woman with her children, surrounded by fire, and the only thing she can say to comfort them is that they'll be with their father now. It's horrifying and it's shocking, but it was like I said, Godzilla, Godzilla's attacks have not been portrayed like that ever since, and only with a few movies, named like I said, GMK, have Godzilla ever been seen as such a vile creature. And I say that with the best of intent, not to say that Godzilla is just purely evil in this movie, because that's not the point, and I will get to that point. But like I said, it's very rare, after Return of Godzilla in 1984, the Heisei movies themselves, very good movies, by the way, very good movies. One of my favorite Godzilla movies come from that era. However, they like to show an era. They're not, focus too much on the suffering of the civilians after a Godzilla attack. In fact, other than 1984, the only terror we see of people dealing with Godzilla is the fact that they have to run away from all the crap that's going on. And you'll see that scene, people running away, leaving the city, and we always assume they're fighting in an abandoned city. And it really was not until GMK that we focused on, once again, on the suffering caused by giant monsters fighting in a city, and the terror Godzilla causes just by himself. Movies like Godzilla 2000 and Mechagear sometimes focus on the darker aspects of Godzilla, but not to the degree that GMK and other movies have done. And that's the thing you always have to keep in mind about this movie, and why it hits so hard to this day. It's not just a fun sci-fi adventure, it's making a point. War is hell, and what is the definition of hell other than a nuclear weapon going off? And that's basically what Godzilla turns Tokyo into, a little slice of hell. The imagery there is astounding. Everything's on fire. Nothing is left standing. And that's the crazy thing about this movie. Other movies show quite a bit of devastation happening, but this is one of the rare movies you see in the morning when it's all said and done. Nothing is left standing in this city. Absolutely nothing. It's entirely flattened. And, the Japanese people are at a loss. They've completely been defeated. They have nothing left. And that is the tragedy of, of any conflict, especially of this scale. And the funny thing about this movie is when you compare it to the American version, the characters are, diced apart. And, I guess that's the point of the movie, like I said, to focus more on Steve Martin. But in this movie, you see a lot more, and it helps you realize just, you get a different view of the characters and why they are doing what they're doing and why they view things the way they view them. I think a fascinating example is Dr. Yamane. In the beginning of the film, right before Godzilla attacks, he's intrigued by Godzilla. And he's also angry that they would try and destroy Godzilla without giving it a second thought, because we could learn so much from him, as far as how he survived this nuclear test. Like I said, there's a lot to learn from a creature like that. Of course, that's overshadowed by the fact that he learns how much of a destructive force Godzilla is, at which point he, pretty much submits that view and is done with it. Which would then, they would allude to this later on in Godzilla vs. Destroyer many years down the line. And then, but I think the most fascinating character of all, really, though, is Dr. Serizawa, who is a character we've not had the likes of since this movie. And for good reason. Akira Takarada, who played this character, did such a fantastic job. And the thing I love about this version, you get so much more of an elaborate view on him than you do in the American version. For example, this movie, you learned that he is a World War II veteran. There's a reason why he wears the eye patch, and that's because he lost it in battle. And that, ever since that experience, that's why he's been such a recluse. And, that is really why he has this, very loner, cold nature to him. And it really created such a tragedy out of him. And the thing about this movie, Dr. Serizawa and Gojira are really, in a way, parallels to each other. They're both creatures who come from a history of pain, and they both have, destructive capability. Dr. Serizawa, through the oxygen destroyer that he's created, which he tries to hide from the world. And the difference, though, being Gojira, who lashes out at the world with his power. And then that's what makes the the conclusion of this movie is so very sad when these two destructive forces, born from pain, finally do collide. They're both seemingly wiped out. And the thing is, and this is one of the main reasons why I despise the ending of the original Godzilla. I'm not the original Godzilla, the 1998 film by Roland Emmerich. Is that by the end of the movie, people were cheering that Godzilla was dead, and to me, that defeats the whole point of the character because the character of Godzilla himself is a tragedy. He is not just a monster running amok just for the hell of it. And of course, his theory is never elaborated on until later movies like Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. But here, it's alluded to very sharply that Godzilla is a monster born of pain and misery, which is why they chose the look of this Godzilla. In fact, I love it. This classic media edition. If you look at a lot of the original designs for Godzilla before they settled on the one they chose for the film, he looks a lot like a nuclear victim himself. He has a maimed look to him. In some cases, a mushroom cloud-shaped head. Before they settled on a more traditional look to him. However, that the look they chose for the film is still very impressive because you see the dead look in his eyes. These are eyes that Godzilla has not had since. And even to this day, honestly, sometimes you get uncomfortable looking at Godzilla's face in this movie because the fact he has those beady little eyes that evoke, almost nothing. And you haven't seen that ever since. Godzilla, from this point on, usually has different character. I mean, look at the eyes he had in movies like, Mothra versus Godzilla, where they're still very menacing eyes, but they're more beautiful in a way. And the Heisei movies would definitely follow along with this, giving Godzilla the golden red eyes, which always look great. And then later on, same and so forth, because we'll have more natural looking eyes. But here, and that's the thing so interesting about Godzilla Resurgence that's coming out in July of this year. They got that same eye for Godzilla, the lifeless, angered look to the eye. And that's very interesting. This is the first time they've recreated that look for Godzilla's pupils, like I said, in over 60 years. So it's definitely important to know what Godzilla is in this movie. Like I said, kind of detracted for a while, but Godzilla himself is a victim of this whole thing. And like I said, when people cheered because of Godzilla's death in the 1998 film, it was just disgraceful. It's like the filmmakers missed the whole point of Godzilla. It was just pathetic, really. And like I said, that's why I hold a lot of resentment towards that movie. And that's why I said that's why the conclusion of this movie is so powerful. At the end of the day, everyone is a victim of what has happened. And that goes with the human characters, Godzilla, the people of Tokyo, of course. It all leads to one very important thing that some things should just not be tampered with, and that's the whole message of the movie. I know I've talked a lot about the message. Let's talk more about the crafts. I know that it affects people. Some people would like to point out that they haven't aged well, but you know what? To me, this was the pinnacle of special effects in its day. And of course, you have movies like King Kong, 1930s, 20 years prior, that used a lot more stop motion. However, the thing about this movie is it was made at such a small budget. It really is a landmark as far as Japanese effects go, and doing a lot with so little, because there are still very many impressive shots and a lot of impressive miniature work. A lot of the scenes are burned to your mind because it looks so freaking fantastic. Godzilla's Rampage is probably one of the best he's ever had in a film ever since. It's a very long scene, and a lot of destruction happens, and a lot of the scenes look very good. Like I said, you see Godzilla staring in an ominous way at people. He's destroying everything in sight. And Eiji Tsuburaya, who helped bring this project to life, he put in so much work, and something had never been done before in Japan. Bringing a monster of that size, to the big screen was pretty well done. And then later on, of course, it became forsaken because there's so much kaiju stuff coming out between Godzilla, Gamera, TV things like Ultraman and stuff like that, Zone Fighter. People forgot how much effort went into these films, and this film you see that quite a bit. You look at history of it, yeah, a lot of work went into making that Godzilla costume, and the actor Haruo Nakajima almost died filming this movie. I mean, it was a little miniature version of hell inside that suit. It was heavy, it was hot. And I'm so glad, all the sweat, blood, sweat, and tears I pour into it really shows in the cinematography. It looks so fantastic. Every scene is great. If Fukui did the score, this is one of his best scores ever. It is one of the best he's ever done. I said one of my favorite scores, of course, is this great scene between Godzilla and Serizawa. You hear this tragic. As far as I know, the most usual name for it is Godzilla Under the Sea. It is a fantastic scene. The score moves from slow and wandering, and then just moves to this tragic buildup of the horror that goes on as man versus monster finally comes to an end. Monster is defeated, but of course, so is man. Serizawa gave his life, to protect his secrets, and basically, Serizawa, is the epitome of what the film is. Anti weapons of mass destruction, anti-war. Serizawa would rather die, than even give humanity a chance to replicate his work. Watching, and that the whole side of it is brought up a lot more in the Japanese version. Right before when Serizawa is being approached by Agata and Emiko to please use this weapon on Godzilla, Serizawa points this out. That humans are weak animals. They man versus man, missiles versus missiles. The last thing he wants to do in this world is contribute another weapon that can cause so much loss of life. He'd rather destroy his life's work, which he ends up doing. And it's at that point you really get why Serizawa did all he did and why he's such a secretive person. Like I said, Serizawa is basically one of the best human characters that Godzilla films have ever presented to the audience. You have to thank Tomoyuki Tanaka. Irishiro Honda, my mistake. They really came together to make this a great freaking movie. They did a fantastic job with it. And it's so good to hear that when you hear that the movie started, Tomoyuki Tanaka, got the vision swimming from, being on a plane and looking down at the ocean. And from there, Tomoyuki Tanaka brought his idea to Honda, and together they turned this simple sci-fi story into a movie that still hits hard. 60 years later, it's really impressive. And I must also give credit to the writer Shigeru Koyama, I believe was the name of the writer. Of course, he would write. Oh no, I believe he did the original story. I'm not too sure, but I know Shinichi Sekazawa also helped with the writing, I believe, for this movie. But like I said, it's a landmark because there has not been a Godzilla film quite like it ever since. The closest Godzilla film that ever came to it afterwards in tone and the cinematography and the music would be The Return of Godzilla. Came very close, very, very freaking close, and did good with the movie, honestly. They did very well. It's one of the best movies there is. And after that, I'd say GMK. Other movies try and match tone, but none quite do it just the way this film did. And that's not a bad thing, like I said before. It's not bad that Godzilla's becoming a little softer over time, at least in some portrayals compared to others. That's fine, but it's important to know, like I said, where all this started from. And it all stemmed from a very important anti-nuclear message that, is still relevant to this day. Because the movie's not just anti-nuclear, it's also, anti-war. That's why you see Tokyo devastated. That's why you see the pain of all civilians afterwards, You see some horrifying scenes, children being scanned for radiation. It comes up positive. These are hard scenes. And like I said, these haven't been replicated since. I think Godzilla Resurgence that's coming out this year from Toho is probably going to try and emulate what this film did. And I really hope the film does so because it'd be very interesting to see Godzilla, taken back to this basically a nightmare. And you see a lot of that reflected in how this Godzilla looks for the 2016 film. So they're definitely trying to bring that horror aspect of Godzilla back, and I'm very happy for that. The only thing we can hope, though, is that human characters will also, be up to par because that's also an important part of the 1954 film. The human characters were great, and they expressed a lot of emotion about what was going on around them, and they're a pretty integral part of the whole movie. So for any Godzilla movie to be fantastic, you need to have strong monster development and strong character development. They have to come, they go hand in hand. So I'm looking forward to it. As for this movie, it should be obvious. I give the movie a straight 10 out of 10. This is a fantastic movie. To me, it really is timeless. You know, the effects, the music, the characters, Godzilla himself. Uh, Everything appears top notch. There's no Godzilla movie quite like it. No matter how many times you bring this genre back to life, you know this movie just stands out as undoubtedly one of the best Godzilla movies ever. It's one of my favorites, and it leaves a huge mark for a reason. And a lot of Godzilla movies have tried to emulate what was done here, but none ever come truly close. Like I said, I'd like to thank the four fathers of Godzilla for giving us this movie. Honda, Tsuburaya, uh, Tomoyuki Tanaka, and of course Fukube. They all brought this project to life, and ever since, his character's been a pretty big place in my life, and yeah, a character that I think everyone loves to this day. Uh, so like I said, 10 out of 10. Gojira is fantastic. If you have not seen the Japanese version, I would definitely highly recommend it. Classic Media offers a very, very good version of it. They did their best bringing the movie back to life and fixing a little bit of the grainy images at times. They did their best with DVD release, and I'm very happy. I even think there's even a Blu-ray of this movie at the moment. I'm not too sure if there is. If there is, you can go ahead and go with the Blu-ray purchase if you wish. I'm one of those guys that between DVD and Blu-rays, I still prefer DVDs most of the time because the quality is supposed to be the same regardless, according to the ads. Yeah, but that's what I feel about this movie. Like I said, if you haven't seen it, definitely see it, and hopefully this year's Godzilla Resurgence matches up to it, or at least comes very close. That's all, G fans. Till next time.